Dear friends, please subscribe to my channel. The tragic death of 9-year-old Lucy became Germany's most notorious criminal case in 1904. While cleaning his lot by the river, a garbage collector spotted a package floating near a docked barge. When he tore it open, he was horrified to find the decapitated and dismembered body of a young girl, around 10 or 11 years old, with no clothes. It was immediately evident that she had fallen victim to a gruesome crime. The garbage man immediately notified the police, and within an hour, the chief of the criminal police, 2 policemen, and a forensic doctor were already on the scene. After a preliminary examination of the girl's body, the doctor stated that the brutal crime was sexually motivated. As it was later found out, the girl was strangled and raped. The crime, of which the child was the victim, literally exploded the public. The police chief insisted that the case be solved by any means necessary. Soon after, a report came in about a 9-year-old girl matching the description of the victim who was missing in the northern part of the city. This girl was Lucy, the daughter of a factory worker. The family resided in a dimly lit, multi-story building that housed around 100 families in cramped, low-ceilinged apartments. The neighborhood was notorious, with residences located near beer halls and brothels, where people coexisted with vagrants, thieves, and prostitutes. Police officers Blum and Siegel, the most seasoned detectives, were assigned to investigate the case. They started by visiting Lucy's family, where they found her mother in tears and her 2 brothers by her side. The family explained that Lucy had come home from school. They had all shared lunch together, and then she took the key to the communal toilet located a few steps above their apartment. After she went to the toilet, she vanished without a trace. They searched for her until evening, at which point her father reported her missing to the police. When asked if Lucy was a trusting child, her father replied, "Trusting? Who could be gullible in a place where child predators lurk on every corner, enticing children with candy and money?" He recalled that just recently, another little girl had returned home clutching money in her hand and wearing a torn dress. The police conducted a thorough search of the house. If Lucy had been kidnapped or had left on her own only to be seized in the street, both she and her abductor would have had to pass through the archway, and it was possible that someone had witnessed them. As the investigation progressed, the police began receiving conflicting accounts. One witness, who lived across the street, reported seeing a man in his 30s, dressed carelessly and wearing a hat, leading the girl by the hand. Another person claimed to have seen 2 men with the girl, who then separated, with one of them, a poorly dressed man in a hat, limping and dragging her along. Additionally, a 12-year-old girl recounted her encounter with a similarly dressed man who had approached her with offers of candy and money, but she had managed to escape. The descriptions of the poorly dressed man with a hat were consistent among the witnesses. After interviewing several individuals and checking multiple apartments, the police knocked on the door of the unit across from Lucy's. It belonged to a woman named Greta, who had a history of being registered as a prostitute. On the day Lucy's body was discovered, Greta had just been released from prison, where she had served time for insulting a client. At her small kitchen table sat a man in his 40s who identified himself as Berger, a shabby clothes salesman. He was an old acquaintance who lived next door and had come to celebrate her release. Suddenly, Greta became emotional and let her guard down, revealing that Berger had been intending to marry her for the past 15 years and that their wedding was planned for the following day. The policeman ignored Greta's sentimental confession, and when she realized their focus was on Lucy, not her, she claimed that only one person could be the murderer, Hans the pimp. She described him as wearing a hat, limping, and looking at the girl in a strange way before taking her in his arms. Although the police found her testimony unconvincing, Hans was arrested after failing to defend himself out of fear during interrogation. He did admit to holding the girl, but insisted that he would never harm her, saying, "I can't hurt an adult, let alone a child." Several witnesses confirmed that Hans was with them at the time of Lucy's murder, leading to his release. The investigation had hit a dead end. Greta had been in prison at the time, so she couldn't be the killer. Hans had a solid alibi. There was no solid evidence against Berger either, but the police decided to speak with Greta's father, which led to a surprising revelation. He described Berger as a lowlife and a scoundrel who seduced Greta when she was just 14, moved her into his room, and sent her to work at a bar by the age of 16. Since then, Berger had not worked and had lived off Greta. The father called his daughter a foolish woman who had been waiting for 15 years for Berger to marry her. However, being a pimp doesn't necessarily make someone a murderer, so the police decided to question the building's residents again. This time, they got lucky. An elderly woman reported seeing Lucy heading to the bathroom just as Berger emerged from Greta's apartment and followed the girl, whispering to the woman, "Get out of here, old woman." Frightened, she quickly retreated to her apartment. Another witness, who lived a floor above, recalled hearing a child's cry, screaming "no," followed by sounds like someone hitting the floor, then silence. Another witness claimed to have seen a man by the river carrying a wicker basket, and his description matched Berger's. Digging into Berger's criminal history, the police uncovered previous charges for pandering, lewdness, and drunken cruelty. A few days later, a bloody wicker basket containing Lucy's missing body parts was pulled from the river. When questioned, Berger denied all accusations, claiming he was being falsely accused. However, a re-examination of Greta's apartment revealed a knife with traces of blood. When confronted about the basket, and after Greta confirmed that she had indeed lost it, Berger went pale. His fingerprints were found on both the basket and the knife, making further denial futile. Berger was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. Although Greta was also convicted, she was quickly released due to lack of evidence, as she had been in prison during the murder. The residents of the building were horrified. While Lucy's parents were searching for their daughter, a killer had been committing the crime in the neighboring apartment. Twisted love. In one of the small towns in Germany on the night of March 23, 1928, several people were awakened by a scream calling for help. Police officer Hess stirred, but quickly fell back asleep, exhausted from the night's disturbances. The rector of the local school awoke, approached the window, and through the foliage, he saw a man's head and shoulders appearing several times by the fence. It was 3:30 a.m. He went into his son Helmut's room, noting that his son had gone to a party with friends but had not yet returned, and lay down to get more sleep. Dr. Lutter, half awake, heard the scream, but fully woke when the doorbell rang. Two local men stood at the door and urgently requested that the doctor come outside. There they found a man lying in a pool of blood. Leaning down, the doctor realized the man was dead. He asked the men to stay with the victim and hurried home to call the police. This was after World War I, and in small towns in Germany, it was rare to find a professional police officer with legal training. Local authorities often hired their relatives and friends. 40-year-old Pest was appointed chief of criminal police in 1918 without any examinations. This was due to the fact that by 1923, crime had reached staggering levels, and there was a shortage of professionals. Pest, accompanied by the criminal police, arrived at the scene, took a quick glance at the victim, saw a deep cut on his neck, and concluded it was a suicide. It was early morning. The school rector, worried about his son's absence, went outside, approached the body, and fainted. It was his son, Helmut. When the father regained consciousness, Pest asked, "Could your son have committed suicide?" The father replied, "No." To confirm his suspicion, Pest called in a competent regional forensic doctor. The doctor needed only a brief inspection to ask Pest, "Where's the knife he used to slit his throat? Did he swallow it?" Upon further examination of the body, the doctor unfastened the victim's trousers and discovered he had been castrated. Pest then called the club where the party had taken place. He was informed that Helmut had arrived with two friends, Labs and Gusman, and they had left together. Finally, Pest began to take action. He sent officers to find Labs and Gusman. Labs appeared drowsy and stated that he had parted ways with his friends at 2 a.m. and gone home, while Helmut and Gusman had continued on. When the officer arrived at Gusman's place, Gusman opened the door surprisingly quickly and took the news of his friend's death rather calmly. He remarked that crime was rampant everywhere. When asked how he had parted with Helmut, he said that Helmut had walked him home and then went to his own place. When questioned if Helmut had ever expressed thoughts of suicide, Gusman responded remarkably quickly. Yes, he did when he broke up with his girlfriend. However, when asked what time he returned home, he became evasive, saying he hadn't paid attention to the clock since he had gone to the bathroom several times during the night. The officer requested that he accompany him back to the crime scene. Upon arrival, Gusman refused to approach the body, carefully stepping around the expanding pool of blood. He asked to visit Helmut's parents to express his condolences. As he approached the door, the officer noticed stains on Gusman's shoes that resembled blood. Gusman initially fell silent, but then claimed that he often had nosebleeds. The officer found this suspicious and decided to visit his home again. His shoes were clean and wet. When asked why they were wet, he said he had been caught in the rain, even though it hadn't rained. When the officer took his coat, he noticed faded blood stains. Gusman said he had cut his finger, but the cut was old and all of his explanations seemed unconvincing. The officer then asked, "Could it be that you wiped the blood from your nose with a handkerchief?" Gusman hastily replied, "Yes, of course." When asked where it was, he hesitated, paled, and answered, "Under the pillow." There was no handkerchief under the pillow, but a folder lay next to the bed. When the officer opened it, he found a sheath for a folding knife, though the knife itself was missing. After seizing the coat for forensic analysis, the officer decided to speak with Gusman's former classmates. They all feared him. He was extremely polite to teachers, but harsh and rude to the boys and showed tendencies toward perversion. He was a homosexual and sadist, with a penchant for small boys, enjoyed beating them with thin rods, and killed cats. He was a good actor, pretending to be a modest person. Regarding Gusman's relationship with Helmut, they reported that Gusman had been cruel. Helmut was a very capable student, but weak-willed. Gusman had joined the class after being held back a year and quickly latched on to Helmut. When Helmut began dating a girl, Gusman beat him in front of everyone, insisting that he wouldn't let him love anyone but him. Based on these testimonies, the officer speculated that a tragedy fueled by love and hatred between a homosexual and his victim had unfolded that night. The fact that the victim had been castrated supported this theory. It was confirmed that the blood type on Gusman's coat belonged to Helmut. Gusman was arrested and imprisoned. His behavior confirmed his homosexuality, and he requested to be placed in a cell with a young delinquent. What happened between them remains unclear, but Gusman was found hanged in his cell.